young adults, how's it going? Pastor Josh here. I hope that you're watching this with your group. If you've come across it on YouTube or something, I want you to know that this video is specifically made for our groups to watch together, because we're talking in this video about how our young adult groups work, what's some of the philosophy, what's the vision behind our groups, and really just what are the expectations of what these groups are going to be like. Now, I want to let you guys know that I'm assuming you're watching this probably in your first couple of weeks or months as a group. I want you to know that I'm so excited for you. I think this journey of joining a group, being a part of a group, it's incredible. Honestly, so many of my best friends have been made through groups I've been a part of, whether in youth or young adults. So I want to make this video for all of our groups to watch as they get going, because I want to help set some of the expectations of what these groups are and how they're going to function. Now, obviously, as we all know, things are online right now. We're in the middle of COVID, which means that things are a little bit different than maybe we expected them to be. And I think for all of us, our experiences of groups will be quite different for the next while. So I'm going to share some stuff that maybe won't make as much sense because of what's going on with COVID right now. But hopefully in the future will be helpful. And then also I want to speak a little bit to what's going on right now as your groups are meeting online. Now, if you remember in our What It Takes series that we studied in January of this year, I was talking about community and how the biggest killer of community is unmet expectations. So my hope in this video is to clarify what the expectations should be. And the reason why expectations is so important is because it brings clarity. And the reason clarity matters so much is that if we want to have, our groups really be effective at reaching people and discipling people and creating a sense of family and all that stuff, then we need to have clarity. We need to understand what God is calling us to. One of the things that excites me about creating all these groups across young adults is that all the groups are going to reach different types of people for Jesus. Not all of our groups will reach the same types of people. And that's incredible. But what that means is that our groups need to have clarity on what they're doing and what their groups are really about. Now, one of the first things that we need to talk about is, why are we doing young adult groups? We've been doing these Sunday night services. Why are we also doing these groups now? Well, one of the reasons why we're doing these groups is actually because it's a part of the vision of our church. The vision of our church is to become a regional church of 10,000, meeting the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of people in Jesus' name. So to reach the physical and the spiritual and the emotional needs of people, I think that happens in the context of community best. Also, the mission of our church is to make fully devoted followers of Jesus, meaning to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. And I believe that discipleship can only really happen over long-term interpersonal relationships, which happen in the context of community. If I don't know you and you don't know me, how are we going to help each other grow closer to Jesus? It's through community, it's through having a sense of family that we actually spur each other on towards Jesus. So that is where our groups kind of come into the picture. Now, specifically in young adults, we have a vision that falls under the vision of our church. And our young adult vision is to invite young adults into God's redemptive story by becoming communities of belonging, growth, and mission. And the key thing there is the idea of communities. It's not just a single community, but it's communities. And why that's important to emphasize is that historically at Sanctus and at a lot of churches actually in this area, it's very common for there to be maybe 50 to 100 young adults, and kind of everyone knows everyone. Everyone's friends with everyone, and that can be really great. But the reality for our community now is that it's just getting bigger than that. And we're not just one community. And, as a church, we have multiple sites, and we're going to be going downtown and to North York and to Peterborough, and we're going to be spreading out as a church, which means that we can't all be one community. So we're going to be communities. We're going to have groups across all of our different sites, across the whole Durham and GTA region. They're going to reach different kinds of people in different ways. And I think that's really exciting. We're not all meant to be friends with everyone. We're meant to, I think, have a couple really important relationships and a bit of a broader community around us that we do life with, but we can't all be friends. So that's why we're moving in this direction of groups. Now, these groups are very much based on the model that we see Jesus use with his disciples, where he poured into them and then he sent them to go pour into others. And that's what we want these groups to be about. We want them to be about multiplication and reaching more people. And specifically, we've designed our young adult groups around 3 identities that we see in the Christian life. The first being family, the second being disciple, and the third being missionary. We are all called to be part of God's family, and in the family of the church, brothers and sisters in Christ together, we're all called to be disciples of Jesus, and we're all called to be missionaries because we're commissioned for the sake of Christ. So how do our groups function in these three identities? So the way that we accomplish these three identities in our groups is we've actually set up three different kinds of nights to represent these identities. So the first one being the identity of family, that's going to be accomplished through what we call belonging nights. Now, if you remember our vision, it's about belonging, growth, and mission, and that's the common words used here. So belonging nights, what are they about? Well, they're about forming that sense of family together. So this is, how do you grow closer? How do you grow deeper? How do you get to know each other? How do you connect? Belonging night is always going to feature a meal. Now, obviously, that's going to be a little bit harder right now because things are online. But the goal would be that every night, once we're back in person one day, is that you'd have a meal together and then you'd have meaningful and rich conversation that builds depth amongst your group. So a belonging night might have a potluck, it might be ordering pizza, it might be creating a really good sit-down meal at someone's house if you've got some great cooks. And then just having good, meaningful discussion, whether that's a testimony night or an encouragement night or just sharing about some highs and lows in life these days. And I've given your leaders a bunch of great examples and tools of things that I've tried and I've tested before in groups that work really well for building that sense of family. So that's the first kind of night, belonging nights. The second kind is our growth nights, and that's related to the identity of disciple. So the growth nights, what are those about? Well, they're about worship and teaching and discussion and prayer. In many ways, they'll be the most similar to probably what you've experienced in a group before. Now, you might ask, well, what do we actually study as a group during a growth night? Well, something that's exciting about our groups is that I am empowering our leaders to actually pastor the groups and choose, hey, this is what our group needs in this season based on our stage of life, based on what the Spirit is speaking to us. And what's so cool about that is that every group then will be able to study a different thing. So we're not centralizing our curriculum, but we're allowing the leaders of your group to say, hey, I think actually right now our group needs to learn about this or about that. And this is great because we're a diverse community. And that means that we want to reach different people with different messages at different times. Now, another thing that might happen at a growth night is you'll probably have discussion. And something that often people will ask is, well, are these groups co-ed or are they guys and girls, or how's this work? And we've chosen to keep all of our groups co-ed. Now, we're not against, guys and girls kind of doing their own thing, but what, really I've seen over the years as I've been in young adult ministry is that most people in their 20s at some point are going to be in a relationship. And oftentimes people want to be in the same group as the person they're in relationship with, whether that's someone they're dating or they're engaged to or they're married. So we don't want to allow our groups to only be guys and girls and then not have that fit. Now, another thing is that most people, also see groups and community as a place to meet someone for the future. And that's great. And that's not a bad thing. Now, please don't make it a priority. That's, the first thing that you're trying to focus on, or please don't date everyone in your group. But it's not wrong to also see your group as a place where you could meet someone that could be a lifelong companion. But what that means is that we also want to have times where guys and girls do things separately. So a growth night is a great example where, as guys and girls, you might split off and have discussions separately or maybe prayer differently. And I really encourage you as guys and girls to find, relationships outside of the group where you also connect on a deeper level. I often, in groups I was a part of, would have a couple guys that I do reading plans with on the YouVersion app, or I'd pray with, or I do coffees with. So foster those relationships, but our groups are going to stay co-ed because that reflects the body of Christ. That's what the church is, both male and female, and the strengths and perspectives of both. Now, the last kind of night that we're going to have is called mission nights. And this is all about our identity as missionaries. Jesus commissioned us in Matthew 28 to go and make disciples and baptizing them and teaching them to obey. So this is what a mission night is all about, is thinking about the people who don't yet know Jesus, who God has put in our lives. This might be our friends, our coworkers, our neighbors. And our mission nights are specifically designed to be a catalyst to speak about mission. Now, obviously, we all individually have mission with people in our lives, but also as a group, we want to encourage you to live on mission together. Something that I said to your leaders was when we were doing our training, is I said, don't just bring people to the group, but bring your group to people. Meaning, don't just make it about inviting someone to come to your group, especially if they're not a Christian. What I'd encourage you to do is instead invite people from your group to be in relationship with friends that you have who maybe are from university or from your workplace, and get to know each other outside of group. And then use things like a mission night to bring them in. Oftentimes a mission night might look like something like a party or just hanging out, doing something social, or maybe it might actually center around an act of service or a charitable cause. There's really two ways I've encouraged our group leaders to think about mission. They could first, look at our local and global partners and say, hey, is one of these maybe one that we want to get behind and pray for and serve and give to and support? for example, the Pregnancy Care Center or the Refuge. But also you might as a group say, hey, we're going to go more of the hospitality route, and we're going to just live radical generosity. Love in action is what hospitality is. So that's often how, I've done it in the past with groups, is where we just have, a party and we invite a bunch of people who don't know Jesus to come, and we get to know each other and we socialize and we build friendships, and people start to come into the broader community of our group. And then conversations can start to open up about the gospel and who Jesus is and why we gather every week as a group. And as friendships are formed, cool things really happen. So those are the three kind of nights that we're going to have in our groups: belonging, growth, and mission. And that might be new to you. Maybe you haven't been a part of a group like this, but I'd really encourage you, step into it and experience what it's like to focus on those three different identities. Now, the other thing to know about our groups is that they have a rhythm of how they meet. So we have growth nights probably twice in a 5-week rotation. We have mission and belonging nights both once. And then also we have what's called a free night. And this might be something that maybe you don't do as often when you meet online. I'm not sure. Depends on your group. But the idea of a free night is that we just want to have a practice and a rhythm of rest as groups. We don't want to just be going 52 weeks a year. At the same time, we also don't want to be taking, massive pauses or breaks in the year. Something that I really believe when it comes to groups is, if groups are really meant to be your community, if they're meant to be family, you don't just take, a break for 3 or 4 months from friends or from family or community. You wouldn't say to your friend, hey, I'll see you in 4 months, right? So we don't want our groups to also be doing that. So instead, we want them to have these rhythms of rest, and then maybe have extended times of breaks, maybe in times like Christmas, where you take 3 or 4 weeks off and don't see each other. But we want to encourage your group to meet all year. And, in the summer, oftentimes people have asked, our groups also meeting in the summer. And I'd encourage you, please do meet in the summer. I've found that as young adults, often the summer is one of the best times to connect socially, especially if you're university aged. Those summer months are so, helpful and valuable for building relationships and going deep with others. So please do, as a group, find a good rhythm of how you want to do these nights together. Now, a question you might have is, well, how are the groups led? As you've probably been able to tell, we have some leaders in your group, and all of our leaders go through a training that's called the lead track. And what the lead track is it's a way for me to pour into and invest in our leaders. And it's also a way to make sure that all of our leaders are thinking the same way, that they're not just randomly doing whatever they want, coming up with their own ideas, but that we've all been trained. We go through a book, we go through a bunch of different teaching, we have discussion, and we have ways to learn how to do groups the same way, because we want all of our groups across all of our sites to be going in the same direction. So you have potentially 4 leaders in your group, and at certain seasons you might only have 2 or 3, but there's 4 roles that leaders can have in our young adult groups. And what those roles are is, there's a primary leader who focuses on growth nights and the vision of the group, really helping kind of steer the direction of things. There's a hospitality coordinator, and they focus on belonging nights and helping make the group welcoming and inclusive. There's a communication coordinator, and they're focused on making sure that the group's kind of organized and that everyone knows what's going on, and they often communicate with me. And then lastly, we have our mission coordinator, and they're focused on the mission nights and helping everyone in your group learn how to live on mission better. So those are the different kind of roles that we have as leaders in the group. Now, some of you might be interested in leadership one day, and if you are, I'd encourage you to talk to one of your group leaders or come talk to me, and we'd love to help train you to be a leader. We have something called apprenticing in our groups, and what an apprentice is someone who's under one of our leaders and is training under a leader to learn how to do what they do. This is something that we see, I think, in the life of Jesus very closely, where he brought certain people very close to him and trained them how to do what he did. We saw, Paul do this with Timothy. So if you're interested in leadership, that would be a great place to start, is to ask a leader, hey, can I apprentice under you? Also, in your groups, when it comes to leadership, there's something called spiritual parents. And this might be new. Maybe you haven't seen this before in a young adult group, but we did a whole video on what spiritual parents are. It's on our YouTube channel. Please go check that out, because I'm not going to explain it all now. But basically, spiritual parents are an older couple, and they're a part of your group, and they're caring for your group. They're not leading your group, but they're overseeing it, and they're supporting and praying for you, and specifically supporting the leaders in your group. Now, you might say, well, then what do I need to know about spiritual parents? Well, you need to know that they're there for you and that they care about you. You also need to know that they have authority in the group. If there's ever conflict or a challenge or a hard decision being made, the spiritual parents have authority that, I'm entrusting them to make the right decision and to lead your group in a wise way. So know that the spiritual parents are there to support you, care for you. And if you have questions about things like, marriage or relationships or money or just life in general, they're there to bring wisdom that, no offense to your leaders, but us as 20-year-olds just can't, even if we're leaders in your group. So please, really build a relationship with the spiritual parents. And if you get to the point where you're meeting in person again as a group and you're meeting at a spiritual parent's house sometimes, please treat it with respect, treat them with respect, honor them, encourage them, write them notes to just say, hey, thanks for doing what you're doing, because spiritual parents are such an amazing part of the groups that we're going to have. Hey, last couple things that I want you to know about groups. One of the common questions that people ask is, how big will groups be? Well, this is different right now because things are online. So as things are online, we're kind of recommending groups stay kind of like 10 to 15 people on the roster of the group. Most nights you maybe have 10 to 12 people who tune in. And we think that that's plenty big. We don't want to be much bigger than that for this season. But as things move to being in person again one day, what I've told our leaders is that 15 to 20 or 25 is often the sweet spot for groups. And here's why. When I talk to different pastors at different churches, the number one challenge for young adult groups is transientness, meaning that young adults just move a lot, whether it's for marriage or for school or YWAMs or jobs or whatever it is. Young adults are coming and going all the time. And what that means is that if a small group, say, has 5 or 6 people in it, and 1 or 2 of those people go, it really changes the group and often threatens if that group can continue meeting. This is even why we have multiple leaders in groups. We don't just want 1 or 2 leaders in case something happens and one of them has to move on and then the group can't continue. We want to have multiple leaders so that the group can survive. And also, when groups are a bit bigger, what I found from many different groups that I've been a part of leading and overseeing is that when groups are a bit bigger, they're just a lot more inclusive. It's way easier for new people to join in. And also, if I'm honest, I think a lot of us really enjoy being in a larger group of people because we can find a couple people we really connect well with. Our groups are meant to be family, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be best friends with everyone. So if our groups were only, say, 6 or 7 people, it might not be a perfect fit with all those people. But when you have 15 or 20 people in a group, often you can find those 2 or 3 people that you connect really, really well with and can go deep with and be lifelong friends with. And then the rest of the group is still there as community and people that you do life with. But I'd encourage you, think about what is the right size for our group. As leaders, you're going to be making this decision, but as group members, you also have a part to play in this. Groups grow because people invite their friends. And something that I think is really important for our groups to think about is a saying that I used in the lead track. I said to our leaders that, growing things aren't always healthy, but healthy things grow. So instead of thinking about growth, think about health. Think about going deep. Think about making your group inclusive. Think about becoming a really good sense of family. And as that happens, what you'll see is that people will start to come because you'll want to invite your friends, or people will come and they'll stay because it's such a great culture and environment to be a part of. So focus on health. And what that will do is it will drive growth. And the reason growth does matter is that, if you even think about the identity of missionary, we're called to reach people. So many groups that I've seen exist, so many Bible studies and small groups, they kind of turn inwards and it's all about them and maybe they only focus on just reading God's word, but they don't go do anything with it. They're not living it out. Jesus, he instructed us to go and make disciples. And part of that includes reaching new people who don't have friends, people who don't have community, people who don't know Jesus. And we want our groups to be a part of making that happen for our church. So know that as a group, you have a role and you have a calling to reach people who don't know Jesus and to create a space for that to happen. Now, what happens when groups get bigger? Well, a group often, say they have 20 or 25 people on the roster of the group, the attendance might be around 18 people a night. But as things kind of push towards, 30 people in a group, it can start getting quite large. And if you start having, 25 people in a house, that can be really chaotic. It can be a little hard to get to know people or to just organize things. So as groups get a bit bigger, as the roster goes over 25, I've encouraged the leaders to talk with me and to discuss what it would look like for your group to do what's called a multiplication. And what a multiplication is instead of a group just kind of falling apart because it gets too big or kind of just waiting for it to die or letting so many people come and not connect and kind of get hurt and leave, instead it's a proactive way to continue the mission. It's a way to make more space for more people. So multiplication often involves sending a group of people from the existing group out to start a new one. This is the model we see Jesus use with his disciples, where he spent time with them, he invested in them, built relationship, trained them, and then sent them out. And so a multiplication is a great way for our groups to continue to reach more people, make more space for people, and to also give more of you opportunities to step into a more significant leadership role, which I believe God is calling a lot of you to. So that's kind of how our groups will manage their size. Last couple things that I think are important to also share is that sometimes people ask, well, can I leave a group? Can I switch groups? And the answer is, of course. You can always be free to go or to change or whatever. But here's what I would ask is, would you make sure that you always talk to your leaders about things? Even if you're frustrated or if you're hurt or if something's happened or you're angry, whatever it is, please talk with your leaders. I think that's biblical. I think it's, honestly kind of childish to not. I think ghosting or just kind of leaving, disappearing, not answering texts, it's just not a way to love other people who are our brothers and sisters in Christ. So ensure that if you ever do need to leave a group because something has happened, please do talk with your leader, and feel free to reach out to me if you're looking for another group. Also, if you just have to switch groups because stuff's happened, whether it's school or work or marriage or whatever's caused it, know that that's obviously disappointing and it's too bad and it's hard to leave your community, but celebrate that together. Let your group know, let your leaders know, and do a goodbye party or whatever it is, and celebrate that transition in life together. So yeah, of course, make sure that you always just have good communication as those transitions happen, because they will. And then also, as we're online for this season, I think we can all agree that being online, it's a privilege, it's awesome, it's great that we can still do this, but it's not the same as doing things in person. So I'm sorry that that's hard. I'm sorry that we are in this situation where things maybe aren't as good as they could be or what we expected. But I want to encourage you, would we make the most of this? Would we choose joy? Would we recognize that even though it's not the same as meeting in person, it's pretty dang close to it? And there's so many people all over the world who can't do this, who truly are isolated, and we don't have to be. So my encouragement to you would be, for this season, however long this goes on for, would we make the most of online groups, even though they're hard, even though they maybe aren't what you've experienced before? Would we know that the investment that we make now in getting to know people and building friendships, and I would encourage you, do things like one-on-one calls, outside of group time to get to know people better and stuff. As you do that, you're setting a foundation for once we're, meeting in person again as groups. It'll just accelerate it that much more, and it'll be, I think, a celebration and an exciting day. You'll get to see what people actually look like for the first time ever. You'll see people's legs for the first time in a long time probably, and it'll be great. So I'd encourage you, don't dismiss the season we're in. Don't say, oh, I'm not going to engage yet, I'll just wait, because we don't know how long this is going to be. So please, make the most of it. And obviously all this stuff we've kind of talked about, the belonging nights and the growth nights and the mission nights, they're not going to all function the exact same way because of what's going on. But some of our groups are already meeting. They're making the most of it. For belonging nights, people are showing up with their food and they're hopping on the Zoom call and they're hanging out, eating together still. And for mission nights, people are still coming together, praying for their friends. They're still inviting people to come join their group who don't know Jesus and saying, hey, you should hop on this Zoom call with some of my friends tonight. We're hanging out. They're on the weekends playing Jackbox and inviting their group to come join, and everyone's doing it together and building bridges. So guys, would the mission not stop? Our method has changed right now, but the mission is the same. Jesus is still chasing after people, including us, and we want to be a part of that. So engage in these groups, make the most of it. Don't let expectations hurt things. Become family, be a disciple, live as a missionary, and I really believe that God's going to use these groups to do incredible things. Groups is where often you will make your best friends in young adults. So would you lead into it? Would you know that friendships take months? If you just joined a group, if your first week or two maybe wasn't great, especially because things are online right now, don't give up. Invest for a couple months, commit, because I really think that it will be life-changing. So thanks for being a part of our groups. I hope they're incredible. If you ever have questions, please reach out. And I hope that you, as a group together, have an amazing experience. Hey, I'd love to actually pray for your group right now before you guys shut me off, however you're watching me. So if you want to just join me right now in prayer, I'd love that. God, thank you so much for the young adults who are listening to this, who right now are gathered probably on like a Zoom call or a Google Hangout or whatever it is. And God, I just thank you for the leaders, first off, for the spiritual parents who have put in the time and the work and the sacrifice to be able to make this community. God, I pray that the group members would honor their leaders, that they would respect their leaders, that they would speak highly of them. I also pray, God, that the leaders would be humble, that they would be servants first, that they would care for these groups. And God, I just pray that these groups would really become family. God, I pray for the people who are listening to this right now as a group. God, if there is any areas of tension or unmet expectations or things not going well, God, I pray that you would just wash that over with love. God, would these groups grow in the fruit of the Spirit? God, would everyone in these groups grow in just understanding of their spiritual gifts and the part of the body that they play and how they contribute. God, I pray that this group would also understand what their calling is. God, I really believe that you give unique callings to communities. So I ask that you would show this group what is it called to in terms of mission, in terms of reaching people, in terms of making an impact in this world. God, would you make that so clear? God, thank you for the way that you looked over all of our sin and you forgave us and you paid the price and you sacrificed for us. And God, I pray that as we come to community that we would bring that same heart of service and of sacrifice and of forgiveness and of gentleness. God, would all the ways that the devil wants to screw up these groups just not happen, but would you protect our groups? Would amazing things happen through these groups? God, we're so thankful for just the opportunity we have to do life together, even when things are online and a little bit different. God, thank you so much for who you are and how much you love us. Would you bless this group and these young adults together? Amen.